Introduction. The abandoned hospital on the outskirts of Seoul was a relic of the past, its walls peeling and floors creaking under the weight of decades of neglect. Urban explorer Ji-hoon had heard the stories, voices in the night, shadows moving where there should be none, but he didn't believe in ghosts. He was here for the thrill, the adrenaline rush of stepping into the unknown. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and a camera, he pushed open the rusted gates, the hinges screaming in protest. The air inside was thick with dust and the faint, metallic tang of something long since dried. Ji-hoon's heart pounded in his chest, a steady drumbeat of excitement and fear, exploration. The further Ji-hoon ventured into the hospital, the heavier the silence became. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing abandoned medical equipment and patient records scattered across the floor. The names on the files were faded, the ink bleeding into the paper as if the past itself was dissolving. He reached the third floor, where the air grew colder, his breath visible in the dim light. It was here, in the sealed-off ward at the end of the hallway, that Ji-hoon first heard it, a whisper, so faint he thought it might be the wind. But then it came again, clearer this time, calling his name. His blood ran cold. The voice was familiar, yet he couldn't place it. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, coming from behind the door marked quarantine, do not enter. Ji-hoon's hand trembled as he reached for the handle, the metal icy to the touch. Climax, the door creaked open, revealing a room untouched by time. Beds lined the walls, their sheets still neatly tucked, as if waiting for patients who would never return. The whispers swirled around Ji-hoon, now a chorus of voices all calling his name. He spun around, his flashlight flickering, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. In the corner of the room, a figure stood, its back turned. Ji-hoon's breath caught in his throat as the figure slowly turned its head, revealing a face that was not a face, just a void where features should have been. The whispers crescendoed into a deafening scream, and Ji-hoon stumbled back, his legs giving way beneath him. The flashlight clattered to the ground, plunging the room into darkness. The last thing he felt was a cold hand gripping his ankle, pulling him into the abyss. Conclusion: when Ji-hoon woke, he was outside the hospital, the first light of dawn creeping over the horizon. His camera was missing, his clothes torn and dirty. Had it all been a dream? A trick of his mind in the oppressive silence of the abandoned hospital? But as he limped away, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. And later, when he developed the photos he'd taken before entering the sealed ward, one image stood out, a figure standing in the doorway, its hollow face turned towards the camera, a whisper frozen in time. Ji-hoon never returned to the hospital, but some nights, when the wind is just right, he can still hear the whispers calling his name, a reminder that some places are better left forgotten. Break time equals fives, greater than the air inside the deserted school in Busan was thick with the scent of mildew and old wood, a testament to years of neglect. The photographer, Ji-hoon, had come here with a purpose, to capture the beauty and decay, the stories whispered by the crumbling walls and broken windows. His camera was his only companion in this vast, empty space, or so he thought. The school was a relic of the past, its corridors once filled with the laughter of children now silent, save for the occasional creak of the floorboards under his weight. Ji-hoon's heart raced with a mix of excitement and unease as he framed his shots, the dim light filtering through the dusty windows casting long shadows that seemed to move just out of sight. It was during one of these moments, as he focused his lens down a particularly long hallway, that he saw it, a shadowy figure standing at the far end, motionless. His breath caught in his throat. He was sure he was alone. Lowering his camera, he blinked hard, but when he looked again, the figure was gone. Shaking off the chill that ran down his spine, Ji-hoon reasoned it must have been a trick of the light. Yet, when he reviewed the photos later, there it was, a clear, unmistakable silhouette of a person where there should have been none. The realization hit him like a wave. He had captured something unexplainable. The rest of the day passed in a blur as Ji-hoon tried to focus on his work, but his mind kept returning to the photo. The school no longer felt just empty, it felt watchful. As the sun began to set, casting the school in an eerie orange glow, the whispers started. At first, they were so faint Ji-hoon thought he imagined them, but gradually they grew louder, a cacophony of voices speaking in hushed tones all around him. Panic set in as he realized the voices were coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. His hands trembled as he packed his equipment, the urge to flee overwhelming. But as he turned to leave, the door he had entered through was no longer there. In its place was another endless hallway, the shadowy figure now standing at its center, closer than before. Ji-hoon's heart pounded in his chest as he backed away, the whispers now deafening, the figure beginning to move toward him. In a moment of sheer terror, he closed his eyes, willing it all to be a nightmare. When he opened them, he was outside the school, the door firmly shut behind him. The photo of the figure was gone from his camera, but the memory of the whispers lingered, a haunting reminder of the unexplained phenomena in Korea's forgotten spaces. Ji-hoon never returned to the school, but sometimes, in the quiet of the night, he could still hear the whispers calling his name, a chilling echo of his encounter with the dark. Break time equals 5s. Greater than the night was unusually quiet as Park Min-ho stepped into the abandoned theme park, his flashlight cutting through the thick darkness. The once vibrant happy land in Incheon was now a ghost of its former self, its colors faded, its laughter long gone. Min-ho had taken the night's security job out of necessity, but the isolation and the eerie silence of the place had started to wear on him. Tonight, however, the silence felt heavier, as if the air itself was holding its breath. As he made his usual rounds, the crunch of gravel under his boots was the only sound breaking the stillness. Then, faintly at first, he heard it, a metallic creaking, like old gears turning. His heart skipped a beat as he turned towards the source of the sound, the Ferris wheel. It was moving, slowly, lazily, under the pale glow of the moon. There was no wind, no power, nothing that could explain its motion. Min-ho's breath came in short, sharp gasps as he watched the giant wheel turn, each creak sending a shiver down his spine. He reached for his radio, his fingers trembling, but static was the only response. The sense of being watched crawled over him, raising the hairs on the back of his neck. He forced himself to step closer, his flashlight beam shaking as it swept over the Ferris wheel's base. No wires, no motors, just the silent, inexplicable movement. Then, a whisper, so soft he almost missed it, seemed to come from the seats above. It was his name, spoken in a voice that wasn't there. Min-ho stumbled back, his pulse roaring in his ears. The whispers grew, a chorus of voices now, all calling to him from the dark. He ran, the laughter of the dam chasing him through the empty park. The next morning, they found his flashlight and radio near the Ferris wheel, but Min-ho was gone. The only clue. Footprints leading into the wheel's shadow, where they abruptly ended, as if he had simply vanished into thin air. The park was closed for good after that, but locals say on quiet nights, you can still hear the Ferris wheel creak to life, and if you listen closely, the whispers calling out into the dark. Break time equals 5s. Greater than the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the dense foliage that bordered the DMZ. Min-jun and June, a young couple from Seoul, had ventured off the beaten path, drawn by the allure of exploring Korea's forgotten spaces. Their hike had been peaceful until they stumbled upon an abandoned military bunker, its concrete walls cracked and covered in moss. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic, like old blood. Min-jun, ever the adventurer, was excited, but June couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Their laughter echoed unnaturally in the silence, as if the forest itself was listening. Then, they heard it, distant, synchronized footsteps, crunching on the dry leaves, approaching them from behind. The sound was unmistakable, a regimented march that sent a chill down their spines. They turned around, expecting to see hikers or perhaps military personnel, but the path was empty. The footsteps stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. June's breath came in short, sharp gasps, her hand clutching Min Jun's arm with a grip that betrayed her terror. "Let's go back," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Min Jun, though unnerved, tried to rationalize the experience. "It must have been the wind," he said, but the look in his eyes told a different story. They quickened their pace, the sense of dread growing with each step. Then, the whispers started, soft, indistinct murmurs that seemed to come from all around them, voices speaking in a language they couldn't understand. The temperature dropped suddenly, their breath visible in the air. June stumbled, her foot catching on a root, and as Min Jun helped her up, they both saw it, a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the bunker, watching them. In the blink of an eye, it was gone. The couple ran, their hearts pounding, the whispers growing louder, more insistent, until they burst out of the forest and onto the main path, where other hikers looked at them with concern. They never spoke of what happened that day, but sometimes, in the quiet of the night, they could still hear the whispers, calling them back to the forgotten spaces of Korea. Break time equals fives. Greater than the night was unusually quiet as Min Soo, a struggling artist seeking inspiration, stepped into the aging hanok on the outskirts of Gyeongju. The wooden floor creaked underfoot, a sound that seemed to echo through the empty rooms. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and something else, something Min Soo couldn't quite place, a faint, almost sweet odor that made the back of his throat itch. He had chosen this place for its history, for the stories etched into its walls, but now, alone in the darkness, those stories felt less like inspiration and more like a weight pressing down on his chest. The hanok was supposed to be empty, abandoned decades ago, yet as Min Soo set up his makeshift bed in the main room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. The whispers started just as he was drifting off to sleep, soft, indistinct murmurs that seemed to come from the walls themselves. He told himself it was the wind, the old house settling, anything but what his racing heart feared it might be. Sleep came fitfully, plagued by dreams of small, shadowy figures darting just out of sight. When Min Soo woke, the first light of dawn filtering through the paper-thin walls, it was to a sight that froze the blood in his veins. The walls, bare and weathered when he had closed his eyes, were now covered in drawings. Not just any drawings, these were childlike, frantic scribbles that twisted and turned across the wooden panels, forming shapes that made Min Soo's stomach churn. Stick figures with too many limbs, eyes that seemed to follow him as he moved, and in the corner, a single word, scratched over and over until the wood was raw: help. Min Soo's breath came in short, panicked gasps as he backed away, his mind racing. He had been alone. The doors had been locked. There was no way anyone could have come in without him hearing. And yet, the evidence was undeniable. The whispers returned, louder now, a cacophony of voices that seemed to come from every direction. Min Soo's hands shook as he packed his things, his heart pounding so loudly he could hear it in his ears. He had to get out. Now. As he turned to leave, a single, clear whisper cut through the noise, so close it could have been right beside his ear: "Stay." Min Soo didn't look back. He ran, the hanok's door slamming shut behind him with a force that didn't seem possible. He didn't stop until he was back in the bustling streets of Gyeongju, surrounded by people who would never believe what he had seen. The drawings, the whispers, they clung to him, a secret horror that he would carry forever. And sometimes, in the quiet of the night, he could still hear them, calling him back to the Hanok, to the forgotten spaces where something, or someone, was waiting. Break time equals fives, greater than the abandoned subway station in Daegu was a relic of the past, its once bustling platforms now silent and covered in a thick layer of dust. The air was stale, carrying the faint metallic scent of rusted tracks and the mustiness of disuse. The group of friends, armed with nothing but their flashlights and a thirst for adventure, stepped cautiously onto the platform. Their laughter, initially loud and carefree, gradually faded as the oppressive silence of the station swallowed it whole. The leader of the group, Min-soo, had suggested this exploration after hearing rumors of the station's eerie reputation. His curiosity was piqued by stories of unexplained phenomena, but now, standing in the dim glow of their flashlights, he felt a creeping sense of unease. The others, Ji-hyun and Tae-sok, exchanged nervous glances, their earlier excitement replaced by a growing apprehension. The temperature dropped suddenly, a cold so sharp it felt like a physical presence wrapping around them. Their breath came out in visible puffs, despite the warmth of the summer night outside. Then, the laughter started. It was faint at first, barely audible over the sound of their own breathing, but it grew louder, echoing through the tunnels with an unnatural clarity. It was a child's laughter, light and carefree, but in the context of the abandoned station, it was anything but comforting. The sound seemed to come from all directions at once, making it impossible to pinpoint its source. Ji-hyun grabbed Min-soo's arm, her grip tight with fear. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Min-soo nodded, his throat too dry to speak. Tae-sok, usually the bravest of the group, took a step back, his flashlight shaking in his hand. "We should go," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But as they turned to leave, the laughter stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so profound it was almost deafening. Then, from the darkness of the tunnel, a whisper. It was a single word, spoken in a voice that was not human. "Stay." The word hung in the air, a command that seemed to resonate in their very bones. The friends didn't need to discuss it, they ran, their flashlights bobbing wildly as they sprinted back the way they came. The laughter followed them, growing louder and more manic, until it was all they could hear. They burst out of the station into the warm night air, but the sound didn't stop. It followed them into the streets of Daegu, a haunting reminder of what they had encountered in the forgotten spaces beneath the city. Days later, they would each swear they could still hear the whispers in the dark, a constant, unsettling presence that refused to fade. The experience left them changed, their easy camaraderie replaced by a shared silence. They never spoke of what happened in the station, but the memory of that laughter, and the whisper that followed, was a secret they would carry with them forever. The abandoned subway station remained, its mysteries unsolved, a forgotten space where the past refused to stay buried. Break time equals fives, greater than the wind howled through the broken windows of the Jeju Island Asylum, a relic of a forgotten era, its walls whispering secrets of the past. Dr. Lee Min-oh, a historian specializing in psychiatric institutions, stepped cautiously over the threshold, his flashlight casting long shadows that seemed to dance away from him. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and something indefinably sour, the kind of smell that clung to the back of the throat. Min-oh had come here to document the asylum's history, to give voice to those who had been silenced by time and neglect. But as he ventured deeper into the decaying halls, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The patient records room was his goal, a treasure trove of untold stories. The door creaked ominously as he pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty corridors. Inside, the files were meticulously organized, a stark contrast to the disarray of the rest of the building. Min-oh's fingers trembled as he pulled out a file at random. The name on the label sent a chill down his spine, it was his own. Inside, the records detailed fears and secrets he had never shared with anyone, written in a handwriting that was eerily similar to his own. The pages whispered as they turned, the sound growing louder, forming words that seemed to come from all around him. "You shouldn't have come here," the voices murmured, a chorus of the forgotten. Minnow's heart pounded in his chest, his breath coming in short, ragged gasps. He stumbled back, knocking over a stack of files that scattered like leaves in the wind. Each one bore his name, each contained another piece of his soul laid bare. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling the room with a cacophony of his deepest terrors. He turned to flee, but the door slammed shut with a force that shook the walls. The flashlight flickered, then died, plunging him into darkness. The whispers were all around him now, inside him, speaking with his voice. "You belong here," they said. "You always have." Minnow screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the asylum's insatiable hunger. When the flashlight sputtered back to life, the room was empty, the files gone. Only a single sheet of paper remained, fluttering to the ground at his feet. It was blank, save for a single sentence written in his own hand: "The asylum remembers." Minnow fled, the whispers following him into the night, a reminder that some secrets are better left buried. But as he looked back at the asylum, now silhouetted against the moonlit sky, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching him, waiting for him to return. After all, the asylum remembers. Break time equals 5s. Greater than the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine as I set up my tent on the outskirts of an abandoned village in the Korean countryside. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows through the skeletal remains of what once was a bustling community. I had chosen this spot for its seclusion, a perfect place to disconnect and enjoy the solitude of nature. But as night fell, the silence became oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of a night bird. I chalked it up to my imagination running wild in the unfamiliar surroundings and settled into my tent, the glow of my lantern casting eerie shapes against the fabric. Sleep came fitfully, my subconscious picking up on the unnatural stillness of the night. When I awoke, it wasn't to the sound of my alarm but to an unsettling realization: the air was too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums. I unzipped my tent and froze. My belongings, which I had haphazardly tossed aside the night before, were now meticulously arranged in a perfect circle around my tent. My heart hammered in my chest as I stepped out, the dew-covered grass cold under my bare feet. Each item was placed with precision, as if someone, or something, had taken great care in their arrangement. My backpack, my shoes, even my water bottle, all positioned equidistant from one another. The rational part of my brain scrambled for explanations: an animal, the wind. But nothing could explain the deliberate nature of the placement. The village loomed in the distance, its empty windows like eyes watching me. A whisper of wind carried the faint sound of voices, too indistinct to make out words but undeniably human. My breath came in short gasps as I packed up my things with shaking hands, the urge to flee overwhelming. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something else: footprints in the soft earth, leading from my tent towards the village. They were small, almost childlike, but the edges were blurred, as if whatever made them wasn't entirely solid. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of voices speaking in a language I couldn't understand. I didn't wait to find out what they wanted. I ran, the weight of unseen eyes following me until I reached the safety of the main road. Even now, I can't explain what happened that night. But sometimes, in the quiet moments before sleep, I hear the whispers again, calling me back to that forgotten place. Break time equals 5s. Greater than the air in Pyeongtaek was thick with the scent of damp concrete and rust, a testament to the years of neglect that had befallen this part of the city. Ji-hoon, a film student with a passion for uncovering the stories hidden in urban decay, adjusted his camera's focus, capturing the peeling paint and broken windows of an abandoned school. His motivation was simple: to document the unseen, to give voice to the voiceless structures that time had forgotten. But as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the empty playground, a sense of unease settled in his chest. The initial excitement of exploration had faded, replaced by a creeping dread that he couldn't quite shake. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of metal or the distant sound of a dog barking. Ji-hoon decided to record some ambient sounds, hoping to capture the essence of the place's loneliness. He pressed record on his audio device and walked slowly through the corridors, his footsteps echoing ominously. It wasn't until he played back the recording later that he heard it, a clear, desperate whisper in Korean, "Help me," amidst the static. His blood ran cold. He had been alone. There was no one else there. The rational part of his mind searched for explanations, a trick of the wind, perhaps, or an echo from somewhere outside. But the voice had been too clear, too distinct. Over the next few days, Ji-hoon returned to the school, each visit more tense than the last. He began to notice small details he had overlooked before: scratches on the walls at heights no child could reach, a classroom where the desks were arranged in a perfect circle, as if waiting for occupants that would never come. The air grew heavier, the silence more pronounced, until it felt like the building itself was holding its breath. One evening, as Ji-hoon reviewed his footage, he saw a shadow move across a doorway in the background, a shadow that had no source. His heart pounded in his chest, his hands trembling as he rewound the clip. But the shadow was gone. The climax came when Ji-hoon decided to spend the night, determined to uncover the truth. Armed with nothing but his camera and a flashlight, he sat in the center of the circle of desks, the beam of his light the only thing holding back the darkness. Then, the whispers started, not just on the recorder, but all around him, a chorus of voices pleading in Korean. The temperature dropped suddenly, his breath visible in the air. The flashlight flickered, and in that moment of darkness, he felt a hand brush against his shoulder. Ji-hoon ran, the sound of his own screams mixing with the whispers. The next morning, he found himself outside the school, his equipment scattered around him, the recording from that night nothing but static. The school stood silent, as if nothing had happened. Ji-hoon never returned to Pyeongtaek, and the footage he had captured was lost in a hard drive failure. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, he can still hear the whispers, a reminder that some stories are better left untold. Break time equals 5s, greater than the air in the mountains of Gangwon was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, a reminder of the recent rains that had swept through the region. Park Min-joon, a local historian with a keen interest in Korea's forgotten spiritual sites, had spent the better part of the day trekking through the dense foliage to reach the secluded temple. His research had hinted at its existence, buried in old texts and half-remembered local legends. The temple, known as Bogyeongsa, was said to have been abandoned centuries ago, its monks vanishing without a trace. Min-joon's curiosity was piqued by the mystery, and he was determined to uncover the truth. As he approached the temple, the silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. The structure loomed before him, its wooden beams weathered and cracked, the paint on its carvings faded with time. The entrance was partially blocked by fallen debris, but it was the footprints in the soft earth that caught his attention. They were fresh, leading towards a side chamber that, according to his research, should have been sealed off for centuries. The chamber's door was slightly ajar, the wood around the latch splintered as if forced open from the inside. Min-joon's heart raced as he stepped closer, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The air inside was stale, laced with the faint smell of incense and something else, something metallic. The chamber was small, its walls adorned with murals that depicted scenes of monks in prayer, their faces twisted in expressions of agony. In the center of the room stood an ancient altar, its surface covered in a layer of dust except for a single, clear handprint. The realization that he was not alone hit Min Jun like a physical blow. His breath came in short, panicked gasps as he spun around, the beam of his flashlight dancing wildly across the walls. Then he heard it, a whisper, so faint he might have imagined it. It seemed to come from all around him, a voice speaking in an ancient dialect he could barely understand. The words were unintelligible, but the tone was unmistakably pleading, desperate. Min Jun's instincts screamed at him to run, but his legs felt like lead. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they were nearly deafening. In a moment of clarity, he realized they were coming from the murals. The painted mouths of the monks were moving, their agonized expressions now directed at him. The last thing Min Jun remembered was the sensation of cold hands grasping at his arms before everything went black. He woke up at the entrance of the temple, the first light of dawn creeping over the mountains. The chamber door was sealed shut once more, no sign of forced entry. The footprints were gone, erased as if by an unseen hand. Min Jun's notes and photographs from the day before were missing, leaving him with nothing but the memory of the whispers and the chilling certainty that he had been meant to find the chamber, and that something inside had been waiting for him.